What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, March 23rd, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's a very busy day between the economic news and Trump signing the omnibus spending bill, which a lot of people are not very happy with. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us today in hour number 3. And for those of you who have been emailing me, yes, her back is actually doing much better these days. So it looks like we're through that particular crisis here. So getting on into it, earlier today, there was talk that Trump might veto this omnibus spending bill. It's $1.3 trillion for the government to spend between now and the end of the year because they ran out of money, and the government was going to shut down at midnight tonight. And earlier in the day, there were reports that Trump might veto the bill over the fact that it didn't pay for his border wall, and it wasn't really addressing the DACA issue to his satisfaction. But then Trump came on TV and he made a really long speech about how important it was to fund our military and keep going, and basically apparently caved into the war hawks and signed this omnibus spending bill, which spends all of our money on everything except us. And interesting little comment that he made in there about how we're going to have the most formidable military in the world. Well, considering how much we spend on the military, have been spending on the military, more than the next 25 nations combined, 24 of whom are supposed to be friends, we should have the most potent military in the world. But we don't, and that tells you what's wrong with military procurement, the corruption inside the Defense Department, the Pentagon. And again, I refer you back to this book and very funny movie called The Pentagon Wars, which sort of dramatizes and humorizes the actual events in the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And I understand it's out there somewhere, probably on Hulu. Again, it's the Pentagon Wars. Richard Benjamin directed in it. He does a cameo in it as well. And it is a good movie. And you really should look at it to get an idea of just how this gets so messed up. And it's kind of ridiculous giving more money to the Pentagon when they can't keep track of what they've already got. They waste so much of it. There's trillions of dollars that cannot be accounted for, and they keep saying, well, it's just lousy bookkeeping, the money's there someplace. Well, find out, because if you can recover all of that money, then you don't need any more from we, the American people. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more later in the show. Getting into the domestic politics, apparently there's yet another attempt to sue President Trump, alleging he is violating the Emoluments Clause, which basically forbids elected officials from receiving gifts or benefits from foreign governments without the approval of Congress. And the issue that's being raised, and by the way, they tried this once before, and it got thrown out of court. The issue is that foreign government representatives, when they come to the United States, will stay at the Trump hotels, hoping to curry a little bit of favor with Donald Trump. But what Donald Trump has done is that whatever money they pay the Trump hotels to stay there is turned over to the U.S. Treasury. So this is just another lawfare attempt on the president. And I get some emails saying, well, are you for or against the president? Well, I'm disappointed in him. There's no question about it. I'm terribly disappointed in him. But he is the legally elected president of the United States of America, and we all have to accept that and deal with it, and not go crying in our little safe room with our Play-Doh and our bubble wrap to play with. What we can do is continue to work peacefully to make our will known to Donald Trump that we need him to do what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail. Of course, we understand all politicians lie on the campaign trail and then go off and do what the people who gave them money tell them to do. Now, Trump did a very diplomatic thing. He called up Vladimir Putin to congratulate him for winning re-election. And up until now, that's been kind of a pro forma thing for world leaders to do, to keep the networks going. And everybody just, oh, how outrageous, how could you talk to Putin? And, Trump said something I agree with. What's wrong with trying to be friends with Russia? But they just went totally ballistic. Oh, he talked to Vladimir Putin. Oh, my goodness. But on the other hand, you've got Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman basically at the White House, enjoying all the hospitality, buying a bunch of weapons. And this is a guy who's literally soaked in the blood of the people of Yemen. And the media doesn't say anything about it at all. The Saudi dictator is good, Vladimir Putin bad. Pay attention, children. There will be a quiz next period here. Now, Sean Hannity, I'm really starting to like him because he's went on the air and he called CNN's Jeff Zucker the porn king for just the constant coverage of this whole Stormy Daniels situation. And I have to be very honest about it. Even if Trump had sex with this porn star, big deal. I'm sorry, it's not really that important an issue to me, but they're trying to make it one. And Trump's enemies are getting down in the gutter. They're digging up these old Playboy models. They're digging up former contestants on The Apprentice, and they're trying to basically come on out and say, ooh, he's a sex fiend. He's a sex maniac. Well, boy, we've already had one of those in the White House. Bill Clinton. He got impeached and almost removed over it. But I'm really getting Stormy Daniels fatigue. I'm sick and tired of hearing about her. I'm sick and tired of seeing her face. Now, speaking of CNN, there is now a movement, several petitions going on and several groups organizing, to basically get airports to stop having CNN on all those monitors. Because when CNN first started doing this at the airports, they were still a relatively unbiased, balanced reporter of the actual news. But today, it's like George Orwell's view screen. It's just constant propaganda coming from every direction at you. Oh, hate Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump. And a lot of people are very offended by the lower thirds on the CNN feed, which are constantly attacking the president. And so a lot of people are saying, why does it have to be CNN? Why can't it be somebody else like Fox, or even the Cooking Channel? Because CNN's ratings are reflecting the fact that people just don't want to watch that anymore. Well, as we mentioned before, CNN actually pays the airports and provides the TVs to put that propaganda up there. But a lot of airports are now coming under public pressure to basically allow people who are trapped in those waiting rooms to have some kind of an option to tune it out, to make it go away. Of course, in this age of tablets and laptops, assuming they haven't been dropped and smashed by the TSAs, you can watch what you want to watch on your own particular platform. But I'm absolutely in agreement. This is right out of George Orwell. So there are a lot of people organizing to say there has to be a variety. If you want to have CNN on one monitor, that's fine. Have, other news channels on the other monitors so the travelers can go and sit where they want to watch the show. So CNN is starting to tremble a little bit about their foundations. Over at the White House, as you know, Hope Hicks was the White House communications director, and he is now gone. And the rumor is that Kellyanne Conway will be that next White House communications director. So that's certainly good for her. And we wish her a lot of luck. Now, a House Intelligence Committee investigation of Russian election meddling has concluded that former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper misled Congress about disclosing information to, of course, CNN. And basically, the committee has delivered their final report on the investigation. It's awaiting an intelligence agency review. But there was 472 days of investigation, thousands of witnesses, and they found no evidence of collusion between Donald Trump, his campaign aides, and Russia. and meetings between Trump associates, including Jeff Sessions and representatives of the Russian government, did not reflect collusion, coordination, or conspiracy. Remember, a lot of it was about the Magnitsky Act and getting that overturned or repealed. Had nothing to do with the campaign. Now, here's an interesting story. This is from Conservative Treehouse. And they're basically talking about how the Department of Justice has admitted they have a grand jury impaneled in the FBI and Department of Justice investigation. And basically what it has to do is the Department of Justice was responding to a request for documents, and their reply was, we have to review it so that it does not compromise ongoing grand jury investigations, and so forth and so on, which from everybody said, okay, so there's really an investigation going on, and there's a grand jury. But you need to understand that very often the purpose of a high-level investigation is to head off and block lower-level investigations. That's what the Warren Commission was all about. When the Warren Commission was put together after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, they didn't even really have jurisdiction. There was no federal law regarding the assassination of a president. This was a murder, and the city of Dallas, Texas had jurisdiction, but they grabbed the body and they went back to Washington, and they set up the Warren Commission, which immediately went on out to everybody and said, whatever evidence you have on JFK, you must send it to us. And once it was all in their control, they could craft whatever legend they want. As long as Jeff Sessions is Attorney General, nothing is going to come of this grand jury or the investigations. He's going to be just like Comey. He's going to do nothing. And I do wish that Trump would fire Sessions and get somebody like Trey Gowdy in there, or Larry Klayman. Larry Klayman wants the job. He's got a petition up on his website at Freedom Watch. I'd love to see him in there. I've been following Larry Klayman for a lot of years. He is unbiased. He goes after the corrupt in both parties with equal enthusiasm. Well, apparently, some of the Clinton Foundation tax returns are now out because of the open records requirement, and it turns out only 6% of the revenues they collected went to charity, and the foundation kept the other 94%. Now, there's a problem, because to qualify as a 501c3 charitable organization, more than half the money you collect must actually be spent on charity. So there's another issue that's out there that's just sitting still. Why isn't that 501c3 being revoked? And if it was revoked, of course, the Clintons would personally become liable for the taxes on that money. Must be nice to be able to walk around immune from the law here. We're going to take a phone call. Matt in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's Arkansas, Mike.
Hello.
You there, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here. I hear you.
Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, I'm in Arkansas. All right. Yeah, I was just calling to say that a lot of people in red states like me, I don't know if they'll come out and vote for Republicans this fall with the spending, the Obama-era spending, and the Bush foreign policy they bringing on John Bolton. I don't see anything getting any better. It's crazy.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Trump's a disappointment. And those of us who worked as hard as we did and sacrificed what we did to help him defeat Hillary Clinton, he can't count on that support anymore. And if he doesn't do anything about the massive election fraud in this country, yes, the Democrats are going to steal Congress this November, and Trump will be a one-term president. Actually, looking at his face during the speech this morning, it's obvious the job and the stress is really getting to him, and maybe he doesn't want a second term anymore. Although supposedly he has a campaign already set up and running. Yeah,
I hear you. I tried to tune out for a week. Had some family things going on. I turned the news back on, and here we go with the spending bill, and now we got John Bolton. I think people in red states, the deplorables, I think they'll hunker down this fall, and I think they'll just sit it out and wait and wait and wait. That's all I got, Mike.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and I think even over and above Donald Trump, I think there's a general sense of betrayal among Republicans, among the red states, that the Republican Party is as disconnected from the wishes of the Republican part of the population as the Democratic National Committee was during the primaries, where the attitude is, we know what's best, just give us your money, vote our way, and be happy with what you've got. And so, yeah, I agree. I think the nation is headed in a bad direction. I hope we even have elections in November. If these wars get going, they could quickly spiral out of control. Okay, now, there is a news story, a nice piece of propaganda floating around the web right now on how Guccifer 2.0, through an act of stupidity in one of his posts, has revealed himself to be a Russian intelligence agent. And of course, Guccifer 2.0 was the one who hacked into the DNC emails and gave them to WikiLeaks. Well, no. First of all, we know from the metadata on the files themselves, they had to be copied to a flash drive. They couldn't be copied that quickly over the internet. And the original Guccifer, Marcel Lehel Lazar, said that Guccifer 2.0 was a creation, a fiction, made by the NSA and the U.S. State Department. And he's reminding everybody that when he, the original Guccifer, was on Hillary's private server, he saw at least 10 other foreign IPs logged in. So they're still out there trying to sell this nonsense that Russia hacked the DNC emails. And either they think we're incredibly stupid or naive, or they're just trying to wear us down to keep saying, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, until finally we say, all right. We can't do that, though. When they lie, we truth. That's the way it has to be. All right, let's take another phone call. Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but they had breaking news. They had a news conference, and I didn't get the agency, but they had the spokesman out in front there and all the guys with the suits behind her and the agencies and the flags behind them. And the breaking news was that Iranian hackers got into U.S. computers. And after that, they showed pictures of the actual computer operators that got into, that were doing the deed. And it kind of reminded me of John Ashcroft when he had the next day had all the hijackers pictures,
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
How can they get, number one, know that it's Iran, and number two, get the actual people that did the computer work? There's 7 or 8 of them, I guess. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it's, Iran bashing. It's more propaganda because, you can't really find out who's doing the hacking, let alone who's actually got their fingers on that keyboard. This story is total bovine excrement, and it's another attempt to demonize Iran because apparently in May, Trump is going to pull out of the P5+1, and that's going to open the door for war with Iran, which is what Israel has been doing. Israel standing behind Donald Trump, with a paddle board, whacking him, saying, invade, 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 invade. Remember John McCain used to dance around the stage and say, bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, bomb. And he thought that was funny as all get out.
Well, yeah, it's, tragic because, everything's coming together for a war now. All of a sudden, Trump's changing and going that way with the neocons, and he's got John Bolton in there, who's, like you pointed out, is the radical anti-Iran. And as you said before, he stacked his cabinet or his advisors with war people.
Yes.
And it doesn't look good to me. I don't know what to make of it other than that.
Yeah, we're definitely on a path to war. That's obviously the agenda. And we all know what's coming. A global war, potentially nuclear, and they're just waiting to find some way to sell it to the people who have to pay for it and bleed for it. Terry, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to do a commercial break, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And yes, things are getting very intense, very ugly out here. As Michael Herzog was saying in that spot, our advertisers are being threatened, both at Republic Broadcasting and at whatreallyhappened.com. They're literally being threatened, and they're calling the police. The police are doing nothing. And so we need your help. If we're going to stay on the air, if we're going to keep the website up there so that you can find the truth about what's going on, we need your help. It's never been more desperate than it is right now. And if you can help, you have to. Please do. Okay? And the postal address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. This is really serious. We're not kidding about any of this stuff. We really do need your help. And the network thanks you, and I thank you. Every little bit helps. Doesn't have to be a huge donation, just a little tiny bit, whatever you can spare. If everybody in this audience, everybody listening to the show, sent in just $5, I mean, it would make a huge, huge difference. We're not a big, huge operation like a CNN with a huge overhead. We're doing this out of our spare bedrooms or our garages. And RBN has a little tiny office that they have to pay rent on. And of course, we're constantly having to replace equipment, especially here in Hawaii with our salt air climate. The stuff all acts like it's made out of compressed rust. Anyway, enough of that stuff. Getting on back to the war zones, as it were. In Syria, the militants are withdrawing from more areas in eastern Ghouta. They're taking advantage of this amnesty deal. They surrender their weapons and they're allowed to leave with their families. Meanwhile, YPG members continue conducting hit and run attacks against the Turkish forces in the area of Afrin. So it's just ugly. It's very concerning to think about how much war is already going on. And the U.S. is admitting they're officially at war with 7 different countries. Technically, we're already in a world war. U.S. military doctrine defines a world war as a two-front war on 2 continents. And right now, we're at war in the Middle East, Asia, Africa. All we're missing is the big event where all these little wars come together into a single giant world war. And again, look at the history of World War II. Prior to Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of conflict going on. Japan had gone into Manchuria. They were trying to go into the Philippines. Europe was fighting with each other. And all of a sudden, Pearl Harbor happened, and oh, yep, it's big mistake number 2. And that's where we are right now. Now, one piece of good news coming out of Syria is, despite the tough talk coming from the Kremlin and Washington, D.C., the Russian and U.S. top generals are still trying to coordinate in Syria. They don't want any kind of a conflict to break out between the 2 powers unintentionally. So they are still trying to say, we're sharing information, we're here, you're there, but tensions are running very, very high. And the conventional wisdom is that the U.S. is going to try and find some excuse or manufacture an excuse to do a decapitation strike on Damascus, where there are Russian personnel already stationed. And Putin is already out there saying that if the U.S. threatens or endangers or attacks anywhere that Russian personnel are standing, that the missiles will be attacked and the missile launchers will be attacked. Whether it's a truck on the ground somewhere in Syria, aircraft in the air, or another Aegis-guided missile destroyer out there in the Mediterranean. So it's a very, very tense situation. Now, one of the worst aspects that anybody sees in war is the drafting of children and turning them into soldiers, child soldiers. And apparently in the U.S. established safe zone in Syria, ISIL has restarted training children for war and suicide operations. And they're in an area protected by the U.S. and the U.S.-controlled Syrian Democratic Forces in Deir ez-Zor in southeastern Syria. So usually when the children are mobilized, it's a sign the war is being lost. Normally, when you have a war, you send the adult males, and when you start losing it, you start mobilizing the children and the women. That also happened in Nazi Germany. When they were losing the war, when the Allies were advancing toward Germany, they were putting kids into tanks. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to Syria. Syria is now accusing Israel of removing Jewish artifacts from Damascus temples. And those artifacts should be the property of the, let's see, okay, there we are. Should be the property, obviously, of those temples in Damascus. Israel isn't denying what's going on. They just came on out and said, well, this is an attempt by the Syrian regime to distract attention from the atrocities it's inflicting on its own people. This came from Israel's envoy to the United Nations. Now, the European Union has recalled their Russian envoy, and they're all starting to line up around this belief from Theresa May that Moscow is highly likely responsible for the Skripal poisoning. They're not saying it's an absolute because they don't have any proof, but they're saying it's highly likely. Theresa May's new approach is, well, there's no other reasonable explanation. Yeah, it's a very reasonable explanation. It's a false flag. Great Britain and the European Union are trying to Iraq Russia, building a case that Russia has chemical weapons of mass destruction and must be attacked now to stop Russia from using those chemical weapons on somebody. And my concern here is that for this to really succeed, there will have to be a large-scale false flag chemical weapons attack to be blamed on Russia. Because they're not getting any traction just saying, oh, this is the way it is, especially after that whopper about Saddam's nuclear weapons. Nobody's buying any of this. If you go to any website that's reporting on these allegations and you read the comments section, yeah, people just aren't buying this. They've been lied to way too many times. Now, over at the Kremlin, let's see, over at the Kremlin, Poskov, I don't know what his job is, said that British culture of dispute is getting lower and lower. What we see is the country of Byron and Shakespeare, the country of Conan Doyle, the country that used to be a brilliant empire with immense political traditions of diplomacy and so on and so forth. It's turned into a country where politicians are making, let me humbly say, irresponsible statements. And yes, that is absolutely true. Remember, Great Britain is the country that gave us the dodgy dossier to help sell us the war in Iraq. And it turned out everything in that dossier was false. It was basically plagiarized from a hopelessly outdated 12-year-old academic paper. Now, Sputnik News is reporting that while Prime Minister Theresa May has urged EU leaders to recognize Russia as the perpetrator of the alleged attack, her allies in Brussels appear to be reluctant to judge the matter without receiving the evidence. And there has been no evidence. Now, under pressure from the EU and demands from Russia that Britain comply with the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, samples are supposed to be provided to everybody else in the convention. And Britain's been saying, no, you can't have them. So right now, a British court is going to allow blood samples to be taken from Skripal and his daughter for Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Testing. I would be a lot happier if the OPCW drew those blood samples themselves because of past situations where samples have been tampered with. Remember when the International Atomic Energy Agency was in Iraq looking for the weapons of mass destruction. And they discovered some highly enriched uranium in a very suspicious location, and they analyzed it, and somebody said, hey, this looks like one of our comparison samples we brought with us. And they asked the American part of the delegation to provide their testing sample, and the Americans destroyed it. So we've got to be careful. I mean, this whole thing is a fraud. Do you think they're going to stop committing fraud now? They're going to do whatever they think it takes to sell this nonsense to the American people and the people of Great Britain. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I like the concept of the UN, but it seems like with the UN, it's just another corrupt body, obviously, because the more money you give them, the more they'll support what you want. You know what I mean? With the U.S., they go along with the party line. It's the same. If Russia was giving the UN more money than the U.S., they would support the Russians. You know what I mean? Like, it's a corrupt body, just like the Congress and the Senate. By the way, Congress gave themselves a raise, right? With the
they did. Yeah, they did. Well, the UN, the UN, there's more than just the money there, because everybody up there has their own compromising connections to other people in the world. And I know somebody who actually works at the UN, and they say that it is just unbelievable how incredibly corrupt it all is, and it's just out in the open. It's even worse than inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C.
It's another swamp, Mike, just like the EU and Britain. Hey, let me give some words of advice to the Germans and the French. You better go with the Russians and the Chinese, because that's where it's going to be, I mean, they're diddly-dallying around. I mean, I'm sorry, but, Russia didn't do this thing. It's, just like I said, it's a slow movement to a war. We've seen this playbook before. We talked about this already. Same playbook. It's a very small playbook. You only could do a certain amount of things, and there's like a routine involved. So this is a joke. Donald Trump putting John Bolton in is a joke. I mean, my God, what is the stock market's down another 400 points? Mike, it's all coming together. They're going to hack our power grid. They're going to hack our stock market next. You know what I mean? It's all coming together to something soon,
Well,
I don't know.
right now we're seeing a race. Right now we're in the middle of a race, whether we're going to see the economy implode first, or we're going to see the outbreak of World War III. And we know that people inside the government want the wars to happen first, so when the economy comes apart, they've got somebody to blame for it. We didn't do anything wrong. The economy was in recovery. Everything was just wonderful until those gosh darn Iranian, Russian, Chinese, whoever, started all this ruckus. Because the U.S. has done this twice before and gotten away with it. Crash of 1907, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008. We're already at war officially with 7 countries, probably unofficially quite a few more. And that's what the U.S. is counting on to get them out of this mess.
Yeah, but Mike, we had strike 1, World War I, strike 2, World War II, strike 3. Everybody's out. You know what I mean? That's where it's headed. How many more chances is humanity going to get? You know what I mean? At this point, where do these people? They're all going to die. Be in your bunker, come out like you said. There's nothing left. Nuclear winter. What are you going to run your solar panels when there's like a hazy shade of nothing? You know what I mean? Like these people, like John Bolton. That's the way they think, Mike. There's a percentage of population.
That's the way they think here. But something you need to keep in mind: in World War I, all of the nation's militaries did not have the ability to exterminate the entire human race. Same thing in World War II. Okay. And yes, there were 2 nuclear weapons used there, but they were very, very small. We're going into this global war with the world's militaries actually having the capability of exterminating the human race. And that's why we've all got to just push back as hard as we can against this insanity. I don't want to see the surface of planet Earth incinerated and turned into a radioactive waste pile in this argument over whose brand of colored ink and paper we use for the next 100 years.
That's what I'm saying. World War II ended. That was the warning, Mike.
Yep.
That was the warning, and we're starting this. Everybody has, well, not everybody. All the major powers have nuclear weapons. And so you know how this is going to end already. You know, the book has already been written. You know, if you start a world war with nuclear weapons going that you have, you know how it's going to end the war. You know? I mean, you know Nostradamus. What was it, Nostradamus? Or, oh, no, Einstein. World War IV be fought with sticks and stones. Well, obviously, because there ain't going to be crap left. That's it. You know?
And there was another quote by Winston Churchill, who basically said, all World War III is going to do is make the rubble bounce.
Yeah, because, you know, like, you know, we're there, man. We're there. The country as an empire is finished. And all empires, it seems like, when they want to go out, they're going to go out with a blaze of glory. And that's a shame, Mike. And, you know, France and Germany had some spine. They would side with, you know, with the Russians and the Chinese to stop this crap. Because, you know, without Germany and France, Mike, this war can stop. Believe it or not, Britain is a lost cause, unfortunately, I think, at this point. Germany and France, they still got some brains, maybe. You know? I mean, they could stop it. And Turkey helps, you know. But, all right, man, that's all I want to say, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Nick in England. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Can you hear me? There was a bit of a funny noise just now.
Yeah, the funny noise is when you're being switched into the mixer, and that noise tells you you're
right.
on the air.
Okay, got it. There's actually rather nice symmetry about coming on after Dustin, because it was you were speaking to him a couple of days ago, and he was he came up. He mentioned that whole business about Boris Johnson saying that the World Cup this year was going to be the same for Putin as it was for Hitler in the Olympics in 1936, and he mused as to whether I had any thoughts.
You know,
he mused whether I had
somewhere
any thoughts about that.
in the English Channel, there's a shark looking up and saying, "Oh, is that Boris Johnson going overhead?"
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I was thinking about that and thinking about ringing in and discuss that, and the way my thoughts are going was exactly what you were just saying just a few moments ago before you spoke, Justin, about the British politicians, basically, and I've come to the conclusion they're just a completely useless bunch. I mean, I was thinking about, you know, Boris Johnson's comments about the World Cup, because, I mean, it's so unbelievably crass and stupid that it's very difficult to understand what's going on. And this is what I've been struggling with. I mean, you said a couple of days ago you used to have quite a high opinion of him and don't anymore, and I feel that, you know, the same way. Because what strikes me is that he's a very intelligent bloke. You know, he was educated at Eton, and people who've been to Eton and Harrow, they tend to have a lot of confidence. He's very articulate. He's well versed in classics, and he can be very funny. And he's created this sort of persona as a bumbling oaf, and that's kind of what makes him rather popular. When he's mayor of London, and he used to be the editor of The Spectator, and he used to write, I don't know if he still does, a lot of articles for the Daily Telegraph, and they're very, very insightful and clever. And I remember one that he wrote just after the Brexit vote, and there was all these people, you know, young people, mainly outside his home, venting their anger. And he wrote this article saying, you know, as I left my house, I wondered what it was that they were so in love with about the EU. And I wondered, you know, was it the iniquities of the common agricultural policy, or was it the democratic deficit, or was it the fact they destroyed British fishing? And, you know, it's a very, very, you know, it's a very clever article and witty, and he's a very intelligent guy. And I just don't understand how someone like that can look at himself in the mirror. And what is it? Is it that these people, they get used to their chauffeur-driven cars and their country houses, and they just love the power? Because, you know, the speech he gave the other day about Russia and how dreadful Russia is, and talking about the relentless cyber attacks and their intervention in Syria and the way they interfere in elections. I mean, anyone who's listened to your show knows what utter drivel that is.
Yes.
And I don't know, is it because he just lives in a cocoon? And, I mean, you've talked a lot about maybe Donald Trump isn't getting correct information because he's filtered to him. I don't know if these people get into that position, or whether they just get into a position of power, and then, you know, the deep state says to them, you know, listen, son, this is the way it is. We're going to provoke the Russian bear, and you better play along. And if you don't, well, you'll lose your job, or what is it? Or maybe the public will see some embarrassing pictures of them 30 years ago. I just don't get it. I mean, he used to have some gump, this guy. I mean, he went out, you know, he stood up, and he was one of the very few major politicians in our country who campaign for Brexit, and thank God for that. I mean, he went off to Saudi Arabia not so long ago, and he went off message as foreign secretary, and got slammed, because mustn't say nasty things about Saudi Arabia when we want to sell them all these lovely weapons,
Yes.
And he went off message and started talking about the proxy wars, and and he was roundly attacked in the press. And Theresa May slapped him down. All this thing: is he going to keep his job, and all the rest of it? And what was his crime? His crime was telling the truth. And he kept his job, but he's obviously got some sort of gump. So I just simply don't understand how somebody as intelligent as that can. It's almost like they get in positions of power, and then they transpose it into just a parrot.
Well, that's certainly what we saw with Donald Trump, and again, we're talking about the deep state. The bureaucrats who actually run things, the unelected bureaucrats who run things, the intelligence agencies. But it's very obvious that there's been a gathering of world leaders someplace, whether it was at Davos or Bilderberg or wherever, and they all said the economy, the global economy is about to implode, and unless we have a war with Russia to blame it on, our populations are going to hang us from the nearest street light. And so that's why everybody's on board with this, is their understanding. If the global economy collapses and they don't have a scapegoat, their populations are going to turn on them. People start running out of food. They're going to lose their politeness. They're going to lose their patriotism. They're going to start eating the politicians when they get hungry enough.
Yeah. I can almost forgive someone like Boris Johnson when the humbug and the hypocrisy of when he went to Beijing in 2008, because he was mayor of London, and he was taking the flag from Beijing, and he's going to be hosting the Olympics 4 years later. And of course, he went out there and said lots of nice things about China, and of course, he's in a position where he's got to do those things. But the irony and the contrast between groveling to China in 2008 and now coming out with all these ridiculous accusations against Russia is so.
Well, the one that is really obvious is he's talking about Russia's intervention in Syria. It's the U.S. that's intervening. Russia is there by the invitation of the legitimate Syrian government. Anyway, listen, Nick, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the telephones now. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, I tweeted earlier to one of Donald Trump's tweets about Bolton and about this budget that he signed.
Yes.
And I said, you're betraying basically you're betraying the people who voted for you with this. And I got all kinds of tweets back about, likes and what do you call them again? Retweets and following you and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this hit a nerve. I think he's losing his support very quick.
Yes,
now,
he is. I mean, the only way I will support Donald Trump in 2020 is if Hillary runs again. And I won't like it, but as bad as he is, he's still the lesser of two evils. I hope the Democrats run Tulsi Gabbard. I'd like to see her throw her hat in the ring.
I would too, but I don't think the Democrats are going to allow that. I think what we're going to have to see is a real third party, like maybe Rand Paul with a coalition candidate of somebody who's not quite a libertarian, maybe Cynthia McKinney, or maybe Jesse Ventura and a Cynthia McKinney. But they got to get started real quick if they're going to do it.
I agree. I mean, the system is stacked against a third party. There have been third party challenges before, and the rules are set up to protect the two traditional corrupt parties and to not let anybody else in to spoil the party.
But you didn't have the internet then.
No, you didn't. Now. Yes.
Money. It's easier to get your message out, without having to have billions of dollars. It's a heck of a lot different today. And I think it can be done, but they've got it, whoever it would be, has to get started. Cynthia McKinney, I get a lot of her stuff on my Facebook, and I think she's really thinking about it. And I wouldn't mind seeing her. I tell you the truth. I know the things I differ with her on, but all in all, if we continue going the way we're going, we're not going to have a planet left. You know, look at that crazy at Britain now. That's like me going up to, let's say, Mike Tyson in his prime, or even Mike Tyson right now, and seeing him in the street and saying, "Hey, Mike," and start cursing him out, maybe calling him a racial slur or whatever else, and then saying, "I'm not afraid of you." So, what is he going to do? He's going to kick my butt, right?
Probably.
Well, the same thing with England, up to Russia, right? To threaten a country that's about 100 times stronger than they are. And if Russia really feels threatened, who can say they're not going to launch a preemptive strike? They could take out Britain, I think, in like 10 seconds. What's his name?
No, not quite that fast. Not quite that fast. But here's the problem. All of our so-called ballistic missile defense systems are very expensive, and we're being assured they're 90% effective. But Russia's new generation of warheads are maneuverable, and that completely invalidates the doctrine on which all of these anti-ballistic missile systems have been built. All right, listen, Mark, need to let you go, need to do station identification. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's take another phone call now. Mark in Georgia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I appreciate you have tech savvy, and I understand. If I understand correctly, the first thing you want to do with a website is do the DNS, where you basically you buy from the people who set up all the search engines and such, where you have like a IP address that associates to, it's like here's your URL and it associates to an IP address. Am I mangling this, or?
No, you've got a pretty good handle on the situation. What you do is you go out to a company that is a domain name registrar, and you register the domain to make sure there's no duplication. And then somewhere in that same domain registrar, there's a place to basically put what are called your MX records and your A records that point that name, that link that name to the IP address. And that's how you get it all set up.
Now, if I understand correctly, if I wanted to be We Are Change Cartersville, that's my town I live in. There's no other We Are Change Cartersville that I can see on the We Are Change main site. So if I wanted to have We Are Change Cartersville and say, do you love Jesus, do you love truth, whatever, and assigned to the same thing, to the same address, then that shouldn't be a problem, should it?
Not if your server is configured
Sorry?
I said, not if your server is configured for virtual domains, which is where you have one server with one IP serving multiple websites. And what that server will do is it gets both the IP and the URL, the actual website name, in the same packet. And it says, okay, I have to shift this packet over to this particular directory.
Okay. Because I know that it's like in some cases, say you have we are whatever. You have some basics to the left of the dot, and then you have either .com, .org, and it's common practice to say, I want to have both .com and .org, so that if people hit mistake what the extension is to the right of the dot, that they're still going to get to the same website. Is that
that's true, but you're probably going to have to do some configuration in what's called the .ht access file as well, so that people coming on in there will see the pages correctly. If I think you need to get somebody who's a consultant, or you need to go to one of these companies that does it all for you, like GoDaddy, because GoDaddy, you basically go in, they do everything: the DNS registration, the URL, the configuration of the server, and everything. And their website's a little unintuitive, but I set up a website for a friend of mine for a sort of an organization regarding Japanese culture, and they went through GoDaddy.
Oh, okay. So is GoDaddy fairly affordable, as well as, they're not there to sell a bunch of advertisement of their own stuff then, right?
Well, it's been about 2 years since I dealt with them, and I don't remember exactly how much it was. It isn't all that expensive, and if you're not expecting your website to see a lot of traffic, the price goes down. Obviously, if you're drawing a huge amount of traffic, you're going to need a bigger server, and you'll be charged accordingly.
Oh, okay. So, like I say, right now, I just hope you guys are still around when I get my inheritance, where I'll actually be able to make a significant financial contribution, because right now, in the meantime, I'm just trying to, cover my bills until I get another job. So, I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to do things appropriately. And like I said, I have asked them that they apparently, that We Are Changed, they have this procedure where instead of going through a long, drawn-out procedure, they have the school, this online school, where for less than $100, you get the whole training that you need to be, get press credentials and, all like that. I'm like, okay, once I have the money, that sounds great. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to cover my bills. And you can relate to that, too.
Yeah,
So,
I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Because right now, I look at all this corruption going on, and here's these people that are, and I try to explain to people, no, I don't have a problem with Jews. I have a problem with these criminals that think they're above the law because they control the issuance of our fraudulent monetary system. So, no, it's this very tiny minority of some really... Now, wasn't I hear Rothschild, Rockefeller, this guy won 101, he just died a couple days ago?
I must have missed that one. But, 101, he's had a good life, very comfortable life.
Well, but the thing I pity these people is they have all this wealth to make them more comfortable in their misery, because they're very, from what I can gather, and I don't really know this in terms of having any first-hand information, but basically they have a very, they're basically downright miserable in their own where they are, because they have all this carnal wealth, but they're spiritually bankrupt. Can you appreciate
that's one way to describe it. The other part of it is that they are so wealthy, there are no challenges in their life. And a life without challenge is pretty darned empty. And so, now I'm not going to say I feel sorry for the Rothschilds or any of these other super wealthy people. Some super wealthy people find challenges for themselves, like Paul Allen has been doing. Or James Cameron. I'm a huge admirer of James Cameron, not just for his movies, but for what he's doing with his money.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that, there are people that they're so into the material things that what really matters is kind of lost to them, and I pity them then, because, when I say that, I'm not saying I approve of what they're doing with their carnal wealth or the
okay, what's that beeping I'm hearing? What's that beeping?
Sorry, what?
There's beeping on the line.
I just cranked up my car just a minute ago. So anyway, all right. So GoDaddy's a good site to get started, and there's no problem if I wanted to transition my website. Say people caught on and it really got somewhere. I can migrate my web service from one provider to another if I got big enough, right?
You can definitely do that, but just make sure that you have a local copy of your actual web page code, the HTML, the PHP. It sounds to me like you're doing a static site, so that should be very easy. Anyway, listen, Mark, I got to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates, and we're going to pick up another phone call. Kathleen in Paris, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. On my mind is the government and why do we need it. And I want to talk about Acapulco or Anarchapulco. A few days ago, maybe a week or 10 days ago, another caller spoke about the dollar vigilante.
Yes.
And the dollar vigilante is Jeff Berwick, and he has each year in Acapulco a convention of anarchists, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so they made this play. They made this play on the name of Acapulco and anarchists, and they call the convention Anarchapulco. And last year, and it's been growing each year, doubling and tripling, and so it seems to be very popular. In fact, I went, not this last February, but the year before I went. And I was regretting that I didn't go this year, Anarchapulco 2018, because the keynote speaker was Ron Paul.
Yes.
And a surprise guest that showed up was Cynthia McKinney.
Oh, that's a nice lineup there. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get down there.
Yeah, me too. And so this guy, he describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist. So even though he doesn't believe in government, he believes in capitalism.
Well, let's back off here a little bit. I don't call myself an anarchist. There has to be some kind of way of organizing our society, and government's real purpose is to organize for the community what the community needs but cannot organize for themselves. That's its proper place and its proper role, and that is certainly the way it was set up by the Founding Fathers. Unfortunately, I forget who said it, but somebody once said that government is like a fire. It can be a useful tool or just this fearsome disaster. And unfortunately, over time, corrupt people, sociopaths, want that power in government, not to do the job of taking care of the community, but to just make themselves look better, to make more money. Certainly, we can see our federal government is not taking very good care of our community at all. So I would modify that statement to say, why do we need bad government? We do need some kind of government. It has to be limited. It has to be under the control of the people.
Yes,
government is a good thing.
What is it that we can't do for ourselves?
Build a dam. Build a highway.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Well, how would you organize building a dam? How would you organize building a dam?
You don't think people can build a dam without government?
I think it would be extraordinarily difficult and highly risky. I mean, how do you collect together the resources?
Well, if we let the government collect together the resources, they skim off about half of it.
Well, in some cases, yeah, and sometimes they make mistakes. But there has to be some kind of a framework to hold society together. I'm not comfortable with the idea of a truly anarchist environment where there's no government and no law, because that would descend, I think, pretty quickly into just criminal savagery.
That doesn't mean that people can't organize things and decide things and have build a road, for example.
Well,
and even
road,
have
maybe,
even have,
you know, in your town,
even
maybe.
have
But
private
when you're talking about an interstate highway system like Eisenhower did, which we're all still using today. Listen, Kathleen, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this issue. I think that some amount of government is necessary to hold society together, but our government has gone rogue. It's gone corrupt. And
we need
certainly doesn't do any good for us.
Less of it. But we need much less of it, and we need to understand that the government is really quite like the mafia, except bigger.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Today's federal government is acting more like a crime gang than a real government and servant of the people. But the model that Thomas Jefferson put together, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And the failure was that the American people didn't hold government to that Constitution and Bill of Rights over the years. And we just watched our TVs and listened to our radios and went to our sporting events while the election system got compromised. And we've reached this point where we are now completely disenfranchised from our own government, and that should not be. Anyway, Kathleen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to take one more phone call from Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mike, are you there?
We are now completely disenfranchised from our own government, and that should not be.
Mike, are you there? I hear my own voice in the background.
Yeah, hello?
Mike,
Oh, that's weird. Am I here?
Yes, you're here.
Well, okay. That was an interesting phone call. I always thought myself that government was, more responsible for the laws that and to protect us against big, massive, corporations and to protect our borders in more ways than one. Not just to protect them from an enemy outside, but to protect us from indigenous people who are not here for our best interests, but to take advantage of our tax money. And I think you know what I'm talking about, namely illegal immigration. Now, Nancy Pelosi encourages people and has a big following of people that just want, to benefit from the country, but set up their own language and their own beliefs and their own ideals. And, so anyway, the reason I called, I know you agree with me probably on that. Government has screwed up, protecting our borders in those ways. But I'd like to talk a little bit about tariffs. And I don't understand trade that well, but I would say it's a tax. And I guess the government is going to receive the proceeds from that, from those goods.
Yeah, a tariff is a kind of tax.
Okay, well then, yeah, wow. Because nobody wants to hear that word, And let me tell you something. The money junkies today, we have gone down 3,000 points on the Dow Industrial, I believe. I don't have it in front of me, but I think we're down 3,000 points. And people are going to start noticing that their 401ks are going up in smoke.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting right now, and all because of this tariff. But this tax. Okay, how about the UK? I heard the United Kingdom is going crazy right now because of these taxes, these tariffs. Why would that be? Because do they import here a lot of that, or how would that upset the United Kingdom and Europe and stuff like that? Why would they be going crazy?
Well, they're exporting products to the United States, and the tariffs basically make them more expensive, which means U.S. companies are going to turn to alternative suppliers, and they're going to lose money. And we're already starting to see other countries are starting to slap the U.S. products with more tariffs. And so we're in a trade war, and that's going to be very harmful. It's going to be a job killer. They're even saying that the Federal Reserve may be forced to back off from their promised rate hikes. And I understand that tariffs and protectionism are a good short-term solution, but our industry and our agriculture wasn't really positioned to take advantage of it. Yes, there have been a couple of steel factories that have reopened and an aluminum factory that's reopened, but our decay in manufacturing started over 30 years ago. And the factories aren't out there just waiting for somebody to unlock the door and turn the lights back on. Most of them are rusted hulks. In many cases, the machinery's been sold off to other countries or simply sold off as scrap metal. And it's going to take a long time to build this back up again.
Yeah, I live in Chicago, and there was I live on the south side of Chicago, but in the Bolingbrook area, which is a suburb of Chicago, Pactiv is a supplier of lids, straws, and plastic stuff for Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King, huge, and they're going to be laying off. Yeah, maybe a lot of this business with tariffs is going to cause, like other industrial companies like Caterpillar, possibly, would you say, to have to lay off? Or, see, it's a little bit beyond me. These trading as far as borders go in our government. But I thought it was more for the government, a benefit for them to receive the proceeds, the money that they're going to receive because of these tariffs.
Yes.
But evidently, it's just to make it fair. It's supposed to. They're trying to make it fair, but it's going to make it worse. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And they've tried these tariff trade wars before. Bush did it, didn't work on out. And I disagree with Trump on this. If we weren't spending so much money in all these wars, we could rebuild our factories and become an industrial superpower again without the need of tariffs. Anyway, listen, Mike, I got to let you go. We're going to take a short break for commercials. We're going to come back with 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines and get back to the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the phone line, somebody just sent me in a reference. And Mark in Georgia, if you are still listening to my show, you need to look for something called Zeta Boards, which offers free forum hosting. And I posted the link to Zeta Boards at whatreallyhappened.com so you can track that down. And because you're on a very tight budget right now, this may be the direction for you to go to get your forums set up, or your page set up here. All right, let's go back to the phones. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines here because I got a lot to talk about. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. That lady that called in and was kind of insistent on we don't need government. I don't know whether she's a libertarian or not. It doesn't really matter. But you pointed out something about, well, how would you build a dam? Well, if you don't have government to actually, put 100% of their effort into something like that, it'd be up to the rest of us. And honestly, Mike, how many people have you ever met in your whole life that really just don't give a damn? They don't
that's
care
a big
how
part of it.
Happens.
Yeah, it's hard to get people to volunteer to do things like build roads and whatnot. You have to pay them. And that means you have to have a mechanism for collecting revenues in order to pay to build and then maintain the infrastructure that we all depend on. And again, my opinion is that government's rightful place is to organize for the community that which the community needs but cannot organize for itself. Anything above that, we don't need.
Well, that's exactly what we pay them for. That's why they're called civil servants. They do the work that needs to be done in our stead. And just before, I'm going to let you go, but I got a very simple question. What exactly is stopping the United States from building a high-speed rail from major city to major city all across the country? There's only one thing that's stopping it from happening.
They're spending the money on war. They're spending the money on war. They're not building new infrastructure. They're not maintaining the old infrastructure. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's exactly where we are.
Yeah. Mike, let's just say, for instance, back when the United States government used to print up its own currency, would you think that them funding a project like that would be inflationary?
Back when the U.S. Printed its own currency, basically the way it worked is there was always some inflation, but the currency had to be backed by silver. So the currency could only inflate as quickly as more silver could be acquired. And once the Federal Reserve came into existence, that common sense commodity limitation was absolutely removed. But obviously, as the population has grown throughout the history of our nation, the amount of currency in circulation has to increase with it. That's why the U.S. government had a tremendous interest in finding and developing silver mines. In fact, there were a couple of instances where certain states' path to statehood was accelerated because there were huge silver deposits on that land that the government needed to acquire in order to issue more currency.
I'm not even talking about backing the currency by anything. But let's just say you were to undertake, that kind of infrastructure development. the backing would be what you're building. But I mean, so you have this private entity issuing the currency as a loan at interest. Now, governments being it's like the idiots that they are, they always overspend, and so what they end up having to do is to borrow to pay their debts from the year before. So you've got that interest thing happening, right?
Yes.
And so compared to building infrastructure that actually adds value to, you know, the country as a whole, you have governments that are just, you know, borrowing this currency to pay past debts. And
then they just spend the rest on war and war in Israel and Wall Street. Somebody once said that giving the Congress more money is like handing a bottle of booze and the keys to the family car to a bunch of teenagers. And that does seem like that's the way they act.
Well, teenagers and drunks, right? I mean, it's like that guy in Shameless, right?
Yes.
Anyway, thanks a lot for the phone call, Mike. I appreciate your time.
Thanks an awful lot here.
Bye-bye.
And we're going to take one more phone call. Frank in North Carolina. Frank, I'm going to have to take you through the next commercial break, but let's at least get started.
Well, thank you. You know, the thing, you know, the caller was talking about, you know, why do we need government? It's kind of like, well, why do we have to brush our teeth? I mean, the problem is, whether you believe in government or not, some other group of people is going to have a government, and they're going to decide at some point, or some existing government's going to decide they want to come in and take what you have. They want it for themselves. I mean, it's like saying, well, I don't believe in violence. Well, that's great for you, but what happens when a group, a mob comes and they want to
That's a very good point. Okay, yeah. Frank, stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got a lot of news to get through before the lovely Lady Claire joins the show. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Right. Just to continue briefly here, you know, the thing about it is I used to be a libertarian, and I felt for the whole Ron Paul thing and all of that, but then I came to see the error of my ways, and the fact is, might makes right. I don't like it. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way of this world that we're stuck in. I wish I could go to some other place, but the fact is, we were not vigilant. We had a government, and what was required to keep a rational, somewhat just, somewhat fair government in place was vigilance, and quite frankly, a willingness to use violence against those in our government who sought to corrupt that.
Well, hang on.
Though we had 1984.
Okay, I want to go back on there. I really don't like this talk of violence against the government for some very practical reasons. Apparently some GOP congressman just had his life threatened. They've arrested that guy as well. No, the way it's supposed to work, the way it was set up to work by the Founding Fathers is the people in government were selected by the general population through the election system. And if the people in government were doing a bad job, then we simply don't vote for them again. But we have got an election system that has become a farce, and it needs to be dealt with. And one of the campaign promises that Trump made that he so far doesn't seem to be keeping was that he was going to overhaul the election system into something that was a bit more honest and transparent, verifiable. And we now have people coming on out and saying this current election system is actually a threat to national security. It's that wide open to fraud. So that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way this country was set up. You elect somebody. If they do a good job, you elect them again. If they don't do a good job, you elect somebody else. And after a while, the message goes out to all the candidates. If you get elected, do the job the people sent you to do, and you'll get to keep your job. But today, unfortunately, it is all about money power and election rigging. And that's why the American people are disenfranchised. And I'm looking at the signs here, and I agree with everybody who says the United States is a collapsing empire, and history has shown that collapsing empires like to lash out at the rest of the world in their final death throes. Rome did it. Rome was in serious, serious trouble. What did they do? They started launching the war on Egypt and and basically just accelerated the bankruptcy and the collapse of the Eastern Empire.
Well, of course, I'm speaking theoretically.
I'm sorry, the Western Empire. The Western Empire. My mistake.
Yeah, I'm just speaking theoretically. I think we're beyond that at this point. We let it go too far. So
I agree. We're just going to have to stand back and let it collapse. Okay? Okay, I think we just lost Frank. All right, we're closing the phone lines here because I got some news to get to. Now, not everybody in Europe is going along with this attempt to start a confrontation with Russia. Austria has said they are not going to expel any Russian diplomats. So there's a little bit of common sense coming out of Austria there. Now, over in Russia, they're beginning chemical warfare drills in Kursk. And basically, the drill is they are expecting to be on the receiving end of chemical weapons attacks. So the drill is basically going on out and setting up the infrastructure and going on out with detectors to see where the chemicals are and to follow the appropriate decontamination procedures. Down in Yemen, the Yemenis have fired a ballistic missile at Saudi oil giant Aramco's headquarters in Najran. Now, it appears to have not actually hit its target, but apparently Yemeni Air Defense Forces, backed by fighters from the Allied Popular Committees, reportedly intercepted and shot down an F-15 fighter belonging to the Royal Saudi Air Force. But that's okay. Mohammed just bought a whole new bunch of replacement weapons from here in the United States of America. You remember Ahed Tamimi? She was the girl who slapped a soldier who had just shot a member of her family. And they reached a plea deal where she's going to serve 8 months in prison, which includes the 3 months she's already served. So she's going to be out in 5 months. And there was this video shot by her mother on a smartphone that went viral around the world. Well, now Israel has arrested the mother for releasing that video, which again shows Israel's disdain for freedom of speech. Now again, we were talking earlier about this claim that the U.S. has been able to identify actual Iranian individuals who were trying to hack into U.S. computers, which is a very difficult claim to believe anyway, given their inability to find the ransomware authors. But apparently the U.S. is now going to throw more sanctions onto Iran. It's just poke, poke, poke until Iran does something. Poke, poke, poke the Russians until the Russians do something. The only reason the war is not underway this very minute is the U.S. government is desperate to convince you, the American people, that the war is right, moral, just, and necessary. And most Americans are sick and tired of war. We've been at war in the current age for 18 years. That's longer than World War I and World War II put together. And everybody's tired of it. And everybody's tired of being lied into these wars. So, apparently China has just revealed they have a new super tank, a main battle tank, and it's unmanned. It's totally robotic. Now, here's an article that came on out of antiwar.com, and it talks about the issue about how many times we have been lied into war. And it's a very, very long list. They don't even go back to things like the USS Maine or any of that. It's just all the recent times. Gulf of Tonkin, 1967. McNamara and LBJ knew the report of torpedoes was a mistake by an inexperienced sonar operator, but LBJ used it as an excuse to escalate the war. Now, when the Cold War ended, about 1990, the CIA was so busy lying about Soviet power under Casey and Gates, they missed the fact that the USSR was about to fall. They're probably just as blind about the coming collapse of the U.S. The first Iraq War, 1990 to 1991, they lied about Iraqi preparations to invade Saudi Arabia. They faked satellite photos, showing Iraqi tanks on the border of Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, some magazine, I think they were in Florida, they bought time on one of the commercial space satellites and took pictures of the exact same area and showed the world. It was completely empty. And remember the incubator story that got us into the first Iraq War? That was a lie. It was crafted by Hill and Knowlton Public Relations. The so-called crying nurse wasn't really a nurse. She was a daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. Kosovo, they lied about how 100,000 Albanian Muslims were being slaughtered by the Serbs. In Afghanistan, lied about the Taliban wouldn't give up Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And of course, links to 9/11. The Second Iraq War claimed Iraq was making weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons, and that they were allied with Al-Qaeda. And that one was nonsense. Al-Qaeda and Iraq were actually very hostile towards each other because Al-Qaeda was pushing for theocratic rule and Iraq was one of the very few secular governments in the Middle East. Somalia in 2006, the Islamic Courts Union government was not truly in league with Al-Qaeda, which was the excuse used to go to war there. Libya lied that there was an impending genocide in eastern Libya. Syria 2013, the Al-Qaeda false flag sarin attack. Iraq War number 3. Yazidis on Mount Sinjar did not actually need rescuing. They were perfectly fine right where they are. Yemen in 2015, not really bad intel, but notably knew war would be long, bloody, and indecisive, and launched it anyway just to placate the Saudis. And of course, the constant lies about Iran's intentions to build nuclear weapons and just fire them in all directions. They never had them. They weren't building them. The IAEA kept verifying. They kept going on over there and saying, there is nothing here except a nuclear power station and its support systems, which Iran is allowed to have under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the CIA finally actually admitted openly in 2007 that all the talk about Iran's nuclear weapons was just a propaganda. So I ask you all again, pardon me, I ask you all again, how many more times do you have to be lied to before you're ready to stand up and say, I will not be lied to anymore? How many more of our young people have to die in wars started with lies, fraud, and deceptions before you will get angry about it? How much more of your hard-earned money are you willing to surrender to rain down fire, death, and destruction onto people in other countries who have not actually done anything wrong at all? So, it's really very troubling to see where we're going and how close we are and how it could easily spin out of control. Anyways, you probably already heard the Trump administration approves a $1 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia, including more than 6,500 missiles. Saudi Arabia is saying it's for their defense, but they're buying offensive weapons. Now, over in Bangladesh, apparently Rohingya teenagers fleeing from Myanmar are basically being trafficked for sex in Bangladesh. This coming out of BBC. It's horrible things. And I know the excuse is horrible things happen in war. Well, then let's stop having wars here. This one is very alarming. Reuters is reporting that Chinese newspapers are openly saying that China needs to prepare for military action over Taiwan. It's another hot button. And again, Trump basically provoked the situation by approaching Taiwan diplomatically, and this after all the fuss over those islands in the South China Sea. So everybody's talking about this $1.3 trillion bill to fund the government, mostly the military, between now and the end of the year. And the spending bill funds everything but the United States. I mean, the Democrats got a lot of the stuff that they wanted. That was a tremendous disappointment. The funding for Trump's wall is not included. And Trump basically caved on in, and he signed this, and it's a huge amount of that money goes to the military. Also, inside that omnibus bill, Congress gave itself a bonus, and they snuck in a couple of additional provisions that had nothing to do with the economy, including a push for a national gun registry and what's called the Cloud Surveillance Act, which says the U.S. government has the authority to hack into data servers anywhere on the world and gather information regardless of what that nation's own privacy laws say. I think those other countries are going to say that's a violation of our national sovereignty. Over in Great Britain, the number of children in poverty surges by 100,000 in just a year. It's a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's where we are here. Peter Schiff is out there saying stock market and cryptocurrency bubbles have popped. We're going to see how fast they deflate. And yes, the Dow was off 400 again today. Let me get that exact number here. Normally, the plunge protection team will have they'll massage the market for a happy ending, so all the money junkies can have a relaxing weekend. But yeah, the Dow closed 424 down, NASDAQ down 174, S&P 500 down 55. So they couldn't get that back up there again. Peter Schiff is out there saying something I've been saying all along. There's a big problem with the economy, and that is Americans are broke. The machine that sucks all the wealth out of the American people for the money junkies and the war machine has succeeded. We're all living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, just getting by with our basic bills. And that's why retail is collapsing left and right. And Schiff is predicting there's going to be another Great Depression, and it's going to be much, much worse than what happened in the 1930s. I hope he's wrong, but I have no reason to think that he is. Danielle Park is out there saying that rising interest rates a warning sign to all, although we're getting a report that because of the looming tariff war, that the Federal Reserve may back off on the rising of interest rates. Mortgage debt outstanding has now surpassed the 2008 peak, and the quality of the corporate debt market is deteriorating badly. We're heading into another major shakeup. These Wall Street money junkies, they did not learn anything from 2008, and government refused to basically do anything about the problem. They didn't learn anything because they didn't feel the pain. You did. Your families did. All Americans, ordinary Americans did, because the government went on in and bailed them out. Now, over in China, their stock market took a nosedive on the news of the U.S. tariffs. And Albert Edwards is out there saying, in effect, there's an ice age coming. Basically, that this tariff war is going to basically shut down the global economy or seriously reduce it. Now, this is directly opposite of what the globalists want. And apparently, Trump is starting to feel the pressure on this because he's now suspended tariffs on several nations until May. But he didn't include China or Japan on that list. And China is now hitting back at Trump's trade offensive with a $3 billion list of 128 U.S. goods, including pork, apples, and wine, that now face higher tariffs. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. We're seeing the coldest March here in Hawaii since we've moved here. And apparently Central Park got 8.4 inches of snow. They haven't seen snow like that in 130 years. Apparently, they're getting rare March snow in North Africa, southern Spain, on the French beaches. So, Gosh darn that human-caused global warming here. Now, Obama's former campaign director has come on out acknowledging that Facebook was on our side. And the funny thing is, when Obama was harvesting Facebook data, everybody cheered. They thought it was a great idea. He was just so clever. But now they have the latest Facebook data leak. They're linking it to Trump and saying, bad Trump, forgetting, of course, the Democrats were also doing exactly the same thing. Now, a lot of people are starting to disconnect from Facebook. Their stock price is still in decline. And Elon Musk has deleted the SpaceX and Tesla Facebook pages. He's going to go someplace else. Wherever he goes, I think that's where I'm going to go as well. Now, Germany is demanding answers over the Facebook data breach because not everybody whose data was leaked to Cambridge Analytica lived in the United States of America. So, according to their Justice Minister, Katarina Barley, the Cambridge Analytica scandal bombarded users with hate speech. Now, Israeli hackers reportedly offered this Cambridge Analytica private info on 2 heads of state. And apparently the directors of the company instructed the staff to use data provided by hackers. Now, the ex-Israeli spy chief is now recruiting hackers for a new cybersecurity firm. Supposedly they want real hackers so they know how to protect from them. I would venture to suggest that maybe they're setting up yet another hacking operation. Because there is a war on between the corporate media and the independent media. Governments are really discovering that the internet has become a threat to their maintaining control over their populations. But I think the cat is out of the bag. The horse has left the barn. We already have a deeply skeptical, mistrusting global population. And that's a healthy thing. A skeptical people are a free people. Meanwhile, in Sweden, cryptocurrency hacking has gone through the roof. And apparently it's become a major problem. There's a lot of malware out there that steals your computer cycles to mine cryptocurrency for the hackers. And the same people who claim they can identify the Iranian hackers, they can't find these cryptocurrency bandits. All right, there's the music. Time for us to have a station identification. And when we come on back, we will have the lovely Lady Claire. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire with her unique perspective on the world. So what's the first thing that you want to talk about?
I would like to talk about the Iranian alleged hacking situation. And this apparently went on since 2013.
Well, that's what they're claiming.
Yeah.
But again, anybody who's a computer security professional knows that how easy it is for people to hide what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the idea that they could track down the hacking to a specific computer is one thing, but to claim that they knew whose fingers were on the keyboard, that's the shark right there.
Yeah.
So this is just another demonize of Iran as we move forward to what appears to be an inevitable war with Iran.
Yeah, and there has been some conversation in D.C. that as of May, President Trump is not going to recertify.
Yes, I'm hearing that from a bunch of different sources.
Yeah. Read an interesting article. Social engineers are very upset about this. Baby boomers are a menacing metamorphosis to America's large cities. And apparently, boomers, people who could retire, etc., are doing something alarming, and they're flying out of large cities and into suburbia. Well, it's a failed experiment, Michael. You've got inequality, violent crime, you've got disease.
You've got illegal immigrants, you've got the refugees.
Why shouldn't they, if they can, move to an area that where they're not going to be dealing with it?
Well, again, I know the globalist goal is that all humans should live in mega cities, and all the other land be allowed to go back to nature or be used for agriculture.
Yeah.
But people are going to go where they want to go. If we had the means, I'd love to get us out of Hawaii because it's expensive here. I'd like to get us back to someplace, not suburban, rural. I'm a farm kid.
Yeah.
And I'd love to move to someplace like, Indiana. To be close to family.
Yes.
And just, have a little, ranch house out there, like the one that we lived in Washington State, Rancho Runamaca.
Yes, but with electricity that worked.
Well,
and wasn't threatening to tear down the house.
It worked until the last day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
picky.
Sorry. Brown University is now promising tuition-free masters for DACA students. And the officials from Brown University have announced plans to offer illegal immigrants a tuition-free master's degree should the federal government decide to repeal DACA. And the program would be available for any 2018 graduate as a one-year extension of their time at Brown and would come with university-subsidized health insurance and a stipend, according to Provost Richard Locke.
Yes, but natural-born American citizens
don't get that.
They don't get that.
No.
They have to basically enter into these, usurious student loans.
Yeah.
The illegals are getting better treatment from the U.S. government than the U.S. citizens are. This is absurd.
This bites.
It's like this issue about how hard it is to renew your driver's license. You got to show birth certificate, passport, social security card, and yet in California and Arizona, illegals are just being given driver's licenses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's utterly, utterly ridiculous.
And
I mean, the whole idea of real ID, when it started, which had all these additional requirements on the driver's license, was so that undocumented workers could not obtain employment in this country. And now it's completely gone away. They're just handing out the driver's licenses and letting them vote. It's a complete betrayal of the American people going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to ask, Mike, who's going to pay for all this? Ultimately, it's the existing students going to Brown and their families who are trying to pony up so that their kids, who are American-born kids, can get a very decent education. Brown has an excellent reputation.
Yes, it does. But something that you need to remember, and the reason why there's such a problem with the student loan debt, is that the cost of college has increased way out of proportion with the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
It's become hideously expensive. I mean, even just going back to when I went to college, where it was relatively affordable. I didn't have to take out a student loan. I paid my way through college working as a professional magician. Couldn't do that today.
No.
Couldn't do that today.
No, not at all. And it seems rather strange and rather off-kilter, this program.
It really does.
Yeah. And apparently in Sacramento, there were His Life Matters protests sweeping the city after police fatally shot an unarmed black man. And there were the distressing footage, which quickly went viral, showed the moment the officers mistook the guy's cell phone for a gun. Are they blind in Sacramento?
I guess so.
Holy Hieronymus
Whatever
Bosh.
happened to checking your targets?
Yeah.
And we've seen so many of these, where these cops, are they the result of this Israeli security training?
SSRIs? Yeah.
It could be that.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I can understand why these people are very, very upset.
And they should be. And, the mayor, Steinberg of Sacramento, said that he was appalled by the video. And apparently the protesters lined the streets, blocking the traffic in the city, and some of them marched into City Hall and demanding to see the chief of police. And the banners said, "We need answers, his life matters, stop killing us." And what somebody has to do in the major metropolitan cities is to teach every single law enforcement officer here how to walk a situation down.
They're not being taught that.
Yeah,
they're being taught confront, control, suppress.
Yeah.
And right now, the police forces of the United States of America are murdering more innocent people than the terrorists or the mass shooters are.
Yep.
And where is the media outrage about this?
And it should be. And another thing that's going to be going on in Sacramento on Thursday, the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services will accompany California National Guard's Homeland Response Force and the 95th Civil Support Team, along with FEMA, Urban Search and Rescue, CAL FIRE, FBI, Department of Energy Radiation Assistance
The
Team.
gang's all here.
Oh, man.
And they're simulating a nuclear truck bomb attack on Sacramento.
Which is the capital, by the way, of California.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Well, we know at some point there's going to be a false flag to get this war really going.
Yeah.
And I assume what they're doing is they're basically chasing an anonymous truck around the city with radiation meters.
Yeah.
And which means everybody standing next to the truck is getting exposed to radioactivity as this is all going on.
And what was said in the press release was, with the magnitude of this terror drill, the public should expect the training scenario involving a series of simultaneous terrorist attacks across Northern California following a 6.5 magnitude earthquake. The attacks will include simulated improvised explosive devices, IEDs, the detonation of a simulated radiation dispersal device, RDD, and firebombs. Sleep Train area will serve as the training site for IED and RDD response, while Sonoma Raceway will be the site for active shooter response training. And apparently they are expecting hundreds of emergency response personnel, vehicles, and aircraft to participate.
Boy, oh boy, that's a big one.
Yeah.
That is a big one. No
I
question
am
about it.
very concerned for the people who live in that area.
Well, you know, if the U.S. cannot find a propaganda device to get the American public on board with more war, we can expect this to happen.
Right.
Either a nuclear weapon or chemical weapons, because they're already setting the stage to blame Russia for a chemical weapon false flag attack.
Yeah. And we have announced another $1 billion in new arms sales to Saudi Arabia. I have a hard time getting my mind around this, because we know exactly what they're going to do with those 6,000 TOW-28 missiles at the cost of about $670 million, with the rest of the contract coming in the form of various parts for U.S.-made vehicles previously sold. Mike, they're just going to continue the genocide in Yemen.
They're probably going to take part in the war on Iran. Saudi Arabia, under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, obviously intends to become a regional power. And he's cozying up to Israel. But at some point, we may see Israel and Saudi Arabia start to get jealous over each other. I mean, the whole region is ready to just turn into one big battle zone. We're going to take a phone call here from Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Hello, Claire. I have a quick comment. I'm a little worried about Donald Trump. First, declaring Jerusalem to the capital of Israel, and now moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Do you think Donald Trump is suffering from a God complex?
Well, it's hard to figure out what's going on. I keep saying I'm disappointed in the guy. We know that he's friends with Netanyahu, and we know that Israel basically controls our government. And so I think that, basically Trump is a puppet ruler. The U.S. federal government in Washington, D.C. is a junta, an installed puppet regime, a Vichy government. And they're simply obeying the orders of their masters. And this move to Jerusalem could provoke a new intifada. But we're just seeing the United States on so many fronts carrying out these provocative actions against the Mideast, against China, against Russia. And it does look like they're really desperate to get a major war going before the economy collapses. So they've got something to blame for it.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here.
Yeah.
All righty.
And Congress did not pass a law last week about stopping the U.S. involvement in Yemen because there was no congressional.
66 senators who basically knuckled under to the war agenda. And So why do we have a Congress? If Congress is not going to exercise its constitutionally mandated duty to oversee whether or not this nation goes to war or not.
Yeah.
And they just gave themselves a raise in this new omnibus spending bill.
Oh, I know. And I know that Prince Mohammed bin Salman has many honorifics because of having been born into the House of Saud. But I think history is going to remember one, the Butcher of Yemen, or the acronym I use is the Boy, Butcher of Yemen.
Yes.
This is horrific, and every specialist I've read and is saying that this has to be done in a negotiated fashion or it's not going to hold.
Well, you need to remember what's going on here is back in 2015, we were lied into a war in Yemen, and we kicked out, rather the U.S. government kicked out the legitimate government, and they installed a puppet regime. And the people of Yemen didn't want to live under a puppet regime, and so they kicked the installed government out and said, we're going to go back to running our own place. So what the U.S. is having Saudi Arabia do is go on in and pound on the people of Yemen until they're willing to accept foreign puppet rule. But I have to admire how tough the people of Yemen are.
Well, they're resilient,
They're resilient. They're you know, they're putting up with all of this suffering and destruction and death, and they're still fighting for their own country back.
And I was looking at a statement by SecDef Mattis, and I have to wonder what he is thinking, what he's trying to do, because he has made the statement, which I noticed in antiwar.com this morning, that he sees the Saudis as part of the solution. Well, if your solution is to bomb, starve, and weaponize disease to cause a complete genocide against the people, I guess that's SecDef Mattis' understanding of what the solution to Yemen is. You know, I don't know. It's more than a little strange. And apparently Israel has put its rubber stamp greeting on Trump's appointment of John Bolton. And this doesn't augur well for peace in the Middle East.
John Bolton, never met a war he didn't like. He's a war hawk, hardcore, neocon. And it is very troubling to see the White House staff shifting toward more of a war mentality. That anybody who was the voice of reason or the voice of caution is being kicked out. And I understand that Israel worked behind the scenes to get Bolton in as the national security advisor.
That doesn't surprise me a bit, Mike.
But this is terrible. Bolton is opposing a Palestinian state, and he's telling Jordan to resume sovereignty over the West Bank. He's totally, again, he's one of Israel's puppets in the U.S. government.
And back in 2016, he made the statement that the two-state solution between Israel and Palestine was dead. And I have to look at this, Mike, and what I'm seeing, and you mentioned it yesterday, I am seeing President Trump putting together what I would call a war cabinet.
Yes, I'm afraid that's exactly what's going on.
And when it comes to Palestinians' rights to a homeland, he is, unfortunately, just to the right of Attila the Hun here. And there's no way that you can tell me right now that Trump is not building a war cabinet, because that is precisely what he seems to be doing. Now, with the passage of the new omnibus legislation for the spending, $1.3 trillion spending in the House, and it's going to very dramatically increase funding for the military after the federal spending caps, et cetera, et cetera. And the Democrats were just going wild, as were the Republicans, saying that it was a fundamental question of whether we're going to preserve the primacy of American military in the 21st century. And Ryan said that it was critical. It's about ultimately what we fought for so long, to finally give our military the tools and resources that it needs to do the job. But
well,
Mike, this isn't fixing it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're already spending more on the military than the next 25 nations combined, 24 of whom are supposed to be friends. Assuming it was spent wisely and well, the way they do in Russia and China, we would have a very potent military. But the military-industrial complex is not about quality of weapons. It's about making the most money that they can.
Yeah.
And as a result, we have a bunch of junk out there, like the F-35,
Oh,
the
please.
Zumwalt,
Yeah. Don't get
the
me
littoral
started.
combat ships, the F-22,
Yeah.
and just throwing more money at the Defense Department without actually overhauling how this stuff is developed and done.
And with oversight.
Yeah. Plenty of oversight. It's ridiculous to do that. We won't get anything better. It's just a huge, huge cash sink in our economy. And everybody building all these new weapons, it further amplifies something I said earlier in the show. In World War I, the combined militaries of the world did not have the ability to exterminate the entire human race. Same thing in World War II. In this World War, the combined militaries of all the nations does have the ability to wipe mankind off the face of the earth, or humankind for all the liberals listening to this show.
Oh, humankind isn't bad, and neither is mankind. I don't mind either of those terms.
And we'll all go together when we go.
But the real problem that I see is the culture of corruption that weapons manufacturers are able to get away with, because they grease the wheels on both sides of the aisle with tremendous donations. And Mike, until that gets sorted, and until they understand that they have to deliver a product that works, cost efficient, and that it does what they say it's going to do, we're going to continue to have this problem. And Russia and China are going to continue to outstrip us.
Well, there's another mechanism the military-industrial complex uses when they get a program like the F-35. It's broken up into subunits, and the subunits are basically contracted to companies in as many states as possible. That automatically brings those states' members of Congress on board voting for the program, because it means jobs and a boost in the local economy. And if they were to vote against it, then they're going to have a lot of angry voters saying, you know, we had a chance to do some business here, and you wouldn't let us. All right, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, the next story seems rather odd to me. U.S. pilots in Syria fight at a huge disadvantage, and it could start a major war any time. And this is from Lieutenant Mike Rivero, U.S. Navy. And he's how this is happening is that the air war is very complicated and dangerous. U.S. pilots are flying very closely to a number of other forces that have different agendas. Gee, you think. More than just fighting wars, now the U.S. has to interpret other actors' intentions. Because of the close quarters and confusing politics, the U.S. pilots run the risk of making a massive mistake that could start a war with Russia, Iran, Turkey, or others in the region. And the bottom line is the U.S. fighters should not be in Syria at all. Russia and Iran have been invited by the Syrian government to assist in getting rid of the jihadis. The U.S. government was never invited and should not be there. And starting a war with Russia in Syria just may be the point of the deployment.
Well, again, you raised the point here, and we were talking earlier with one of the callers about Boris Johnson and how he just went on this rant against Russia, screaming about their intervention in Syria. It's the U.S. that is intervening in Syria. The U.S. has no business being there. There's no congressional declaration of war. There's no UN Security Council resolution.
Nope.
The so-called terrorists are all but gone.
Yep.
That was the last excuse the U.S. had for being in there. It was part of the war on terror, and therefore were justified going anywhere in the world. Now we're back to Assad is committing atrocities. He's going to gas his people, and they're talking a decap strike on Damascus. That, too, could trigger a massive furball with Russia.
Yeah.
And again, this brinksmanship is utter insanity.
Yes. Putin is not a guy, I think, who bluffs.
No, he's a chess player.
Yeah. He doesn't bluff. And if he said, which I believe he has, that, any strike on Damascus, you're going to feel repercussions, I think the guy means it,
I think he does. And the U.S. may have just pushed up to that line where, Putin is realizing appeasement isn't going to work anymore.
No. And then, apparently yesterday, the website of the Russian Ministry of Defense got hit by DDoS attacks from Western Europe and North America. Gee, I wonder who might have done that.
Oh, it was the Iranians. It was the Iranians. Honest, it was the Iranians who did this.
Come on, guys. If the U.S. and U.K. were behind this, the attempt was childish at best and not a real highest and best use of their computer power.
Well, I mean, the whole point is to, again, it's just poking at Russia.
Yeah.
And again, it looks like they wanted Russia to know where the DDoS attacks came from.
Mm-hmm.
Normally with a DDoS attack, the packets are coming from all over the world.
Yeah, so you cannot tell.
Yeah.
But this time, they wanted Moscow to know, Really ridiculous.
It really is.
Now, turning to Germany, Merkel said that the migrant policy, which she still defends, can never be repeated, as she admits that her plan tore Germany apart. And now she said that it's the new government which has to heal the divisions in Germany that brewed following her refugee policy, which saw more than 1 million migrants enter
well, basically
the country.
What she's saying is all these migrants who came on in and raped and robbed and defaced the place and demanded Sharia law and the rest of it, that they got to find some way to get the German people to hug them. Don't think it's going to work.
No, I don't think it's going to work. And it's not going to work because of a reloaded story that I got. And that is that an Afghan migrant is getting a life sentence for raping and murdering a German student.
Yes, it's a big problem.
These two things are not mutually exclusive, Angela. I mean, this was horrific. And they don't have a death penalty in Germany. Good on them. But they've sentenced this Afghan migrant to life. No vetting. No, nothing that really was going
to... what you get with open borders.
Yeah.
There are very nasty places on Earth.
Yep.
Unfortunately, U.S. foreign policy has made many of these very nasty places on Earth. And we just open the borders and we let these nasty people come on in. It's right out of Frankenstein. We're being destroyed by our own creations.
Yeah. And I would suggest to the ladies of Germany, learn to use whatever weapons are legal in Germany. I don't know what that is right now.
Pepper spray, probably. I don't know what the weapons laws in Germany are right now.
Yeah.
I remember when I was there was a strong gun culture.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we got to take another break for commercials. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call now from Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello to both of you. How is the brains of the operation going, Claire?
How's the what? I'm sorry.
The brains of the operation.
Oh, no. We're co-brains of the operation.
Yes, we're co-brains.
Yes.
Plus we have our own think tank here. For those of you on YouTube, that's our think tank.
Yes.
Okay.
So you guys are a very cute team.
Well, thank you.
Hey, I wanted to. I have a couple of things I wanted to see what you guys thought about. One of them, before I forget, Einstein made a lot of valuable points using thought experiments. So here's a thought experiment. Imagine that there is no men in the Muslim world, in an alternate universe, and it was just women. Do you really think that the women would have formed a committee and voted to put themselves into bags? And isn't that like a proof that it's the men putting them in the bags? And so if we're pro women's rights, then we have to address the fact that there's something wrong with the Muslim women being in bags.
Well, we can have that opinion, but you see, the idea is it's their culture, their country, and we do not actually have a right to go into other people's countries and demand they live the way we do, especially looking at the current situation here in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
We have to clean up our own house before we go out to other countries and say there are ways to improve. But it's a religious thing, and there's not that much difference between what you call the bag, and for example, the outfit that nuns choose to wear because of their religious beliefs.
Yeah. What it is it's honoring the concept of modesty in women. And that's all it is.
That's basically it, yes.
Yeah. And they do things differently. But I do know, Mateus, because I've looked at the numbers, that 50% of Iran's scientific and people who are studying science are women.
Yes.
I think this
women
is a
are
great
very well
thing.
represented there,
Yeah.
and not all of them wear the bags these days.
Yeah.
I mean, down in Saudi Arabia, the one thing that I agree with is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is moving toward a more moderate Islam, where there are not going to be all of these restrictions on the people. But again, it's their country, their culture, their religion. We don't really have a right to go on in and demand that they live the way that we do.
And Mateus, there is a video that I would commend to you very highly. It's out there on the web. It's called Don't Tell Mother, I'm in Iran. And it's this very charming Jewish videographer who is meeting with the Jewish community in Iran and discovering these people are thriving. They have beautiful, beautiful temples, and they also have a seat in the Majlis, which is the Persian word for parliament.
Well, you need to remember, not too long ago, Israel offered financial inducements to the Iranian Jews to migrate to Israel.
They don't
and the
wanna.
Iranian Jews turned them down flat.
Yeah.
You know, they've got good lives there. And all this talk about Iran wanting another Holocaust and Ahmadinejad was going to kill all the Jews. If they were really going to do that, they'd start with the ones that are already inside their border.
Yeah.
But they're left alone. They are accepted in society, and everybody gets along.
Yeah. And in some cases, I would hazard a little bit better than some religious factions here in the U.S.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's good points. I wanted to add something, is that I believe that the women that are in the burqas, most of them are too afraid to object too strongly for fear of physical reprisal. One. Two, they're born into it, so they're brainwashed from birth to be in these bags.
I think that second one is more likely.
Yeah.
I think that second one is more likely. It's just what they're used to. When I was a kid, all women went outdoors wearing a scarf around their head.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that was just what they had been born into. These things are always a matter of fashion. And I think probably from their point of view, the way our women dress, they would very much say there's a real problem there. Women are being forced to go around in skimpy clothing because of the men.
And
well, you have to consider the context of the laws in place, like honor killings. Like the women are so vulnerable; they can be murdered after they get raped, because by getting raped, they dishonored their family, and they're getting murdered. And it's you know, so if you're putting women in bags in the same legal system that allows them to be murdered easily, it's kind of like, are you sure you want to complain about that bag too much, since we can kill you for nothing anyway?
Well, again, I think you're listening more to propaganda. I'm taking it for granted you've never actually been to the Middle East.
I'm actually not complaining about what's happening over there. I'm talking about, do we promote and allow women to be kept in bags in Canada and the States?
I see what you're saying in the context of the refugees coming on in. That is a very, very difficult question. But again, it is their culture and their religion. And when you look through history at all the bloodshed that has attended, where these various religious groups literally go to war with each other over what my point of view is the imaginary playmate in the sky. I think Earth would be better off if people just had this attitude of, I respect my own ways first and foremost, but I'm accepting and tolerant of everybody else's ways.
As long as they don't impinge on mine.
I think the women need our protection, and that it's our obligation as a moral society to pass laws that while you're visiting in the United States and Canada, you're not allowed to put the women in the bags.
That's up to them. That's up to them. You're falling into the same trap that has led us into so many wars, that we have some kind of a duty or an obligation to protect or to intervene. And if you were listening earlier in the show, you probably heard me go down this list of all the times wars have been started by saying, we must go in and bring democracy to these people, or we must go in and save them from an evil dictator, or we must go in and save them from an evil religion. You've got to be very, very careful. These people, it is their fundamental right to live their life the way they want. And I don't agree with things like the honor killing. And in the United States, that would automatically be against the law. And hopefully these people will understand that while you're in the United States, you follow the laws. But in terms of their religious practices, hands off. This country was set up where there is no official state religion, and everybody is free and has a right to practice their religion the way they see fit.
But if it's so complicated, because if it involves raping children, which it does,
well, that's already a crime.
It's not okay too,
that's already a crime. Okay.
No, but it's religious. It's religious.
I don't care if it's religious. That's killing and raping are already crimes, so that problem has been dealt with. And in terms of the burqas, that's up to them. Government is not supposed to interfere in people's religions. Look how that almost tore Great Britain apart. Okay,
yeah.
Mateus.
Okay, fair enough. Hey, Claire, did you want to say anything about that before we move on?
The only thing that I would say is that I'm a Christian. Okay, I have made that very clear on the show. I have no qualms about saying that on the air. That being said, if I were to meet an Iranian woman who spoke English, I would be very interested in speaking with her, finding out what she thinks, especially if she's a little younger, because Mateus, societies change over time.
Yes.
And if we're talking about a college-educated woman in Iran who spoke a really good English, maybe her concept, because of more exposure to the outside world, will change a little bit. And the issue of wearing the veil or the nikbah is something that is generally done when these gals go out. It's not done at home. You would find the hair uncovered at home.
They wear whatever they want.
Yeah.
Again, our government is not supposed to dictate religious behaviors as long as they're not criminal acts.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mateus, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, apparently there has been a telegraphing of the U.S. government and deep states plan to bleed Syria in absence of a defeat on the battlefield.
Scorched earth.
Well, yeah, here's where we're going with that. It was an op-ed by Tim Lester for CNN entitled, "Assad may win Syria's war, but he will preside over a broken country." Could the U.S. deep state be telegraphing what their plans are any more clearly?
Well, let's face it. All during this period where the U.S. was inside Syria claiming to be going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and yet they kept bombing critical Syrian infrastructure.
Yeah.
Water pipes, oil facilities, food storage facilities. They were bombing Syria into rubble. And what they're telegraphing is that if they can't have Syria, nobody can.
Yeah.
They're literally telegraphing they're just going to wreck the place.
And apparently this is a view that's been signed off on by the U.S., Israel, Gulf Communication Council, and NATO.
I'll bet you Syria doesn't agree.
I don't think al-Assad's gotten the memo.
Ah, okay. Well,
Let me be very clear.
I'm sure by now his intelligence services have said, yeah, this is what's going on.
Plan B goal is for what might be described as a federalization and fracturing of Syria using Kurds, Islamic terrorists, and other religious ethnic groups to create a collection of religious ethno-states incapable of resisting the will
incapable
of resisting the will of world powers and one very specific regional power. And we don't have to
balkanize the places
yeah,
what they want to do.
Exactly.
Yep.
And while Syria seems poised to eliminate the terrorist presence in the country at some point, the question still remains over the presence of the Kurds, the Turks, and Americans, and massive implications for conflict with other national powers. If military action is taken to live up to the word of President Assad, who has promised to liberate every inch of Syrian soil. And Syria has experienced 7 years of the most intense fighting in the 21st century, and a massive portion, as you have said, of its infrastructure has been turned into rubble. It's been depleted militarily, economically, and just in about any other way possible in the Western-backed invasion that has cost 400,000 lives.
Yep, it's a nasty situation there in Syria. And I can imagine that Russia is already, in fact, I've already heard that Russia is offering to come on in and help with the reconstruction.
Yeah.
And that is going to annoy the United States because part of the goal of bombing a nation into rubble is that the American companies get to come on in and make the money doing the rebuilding. Remember after the war in Iraq?
Oh my gosh, Kellogg Brown and Root,
Kellogg Brown and Root, all these other companies
Yeah.
That went on in and got all this money in the name of rebuilding Iraq, and they didn't really do a very good job. They apparently, one of the police stations they built was so poorly constructed, it was literally condemned about a year after it first opened.
That happened with the hospital there, too.
Yeah, it did. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. And now Syria is pivoting toward Russia. Russia's going to get the deals to rebuild Syria.
Mhm.
They'll probably do a better job than the American companies. And that's, again, that's where we had that military commander came on out and said that Russia is interfering with U.S. domination of the world. Well, maybe the world doesn't want to be dominated by the U.S., especially looking at how badly they've mucked up the United States.
Yeah.
We're going to take another phone call here from Scott in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Just listening to your show and you and Claire talking about the Middle East. I thought, you know, you could have a coffee table fixture book, you know, the ones that are big, like 2 feet by 18 inches, of before and after of various countries in the Middle East, like Libya. You know, pictures before, you have these vibrant places with sidewalks and trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The U.S. comes in and blows the place all the crap. Yeah.
I've seen such pictures on the web where people have located where photos of these beautiful countries were taken, and then they go to the same place after the war and take another picture, and they put them side by side. And I've seen pictures of Baghdad like that. And you're right, they should all be collected together and basically put out there for the world to see what actually happens with the U.S. intervention. We're not really bringing democracy to these countries.
No.
We're installing puppet regimes, and their quality of life is shattered. The nation is being plundered for corporate interests.
You know, a
whatever
book?
interest.
Pardon?
Yeah, a coffee table book. You know,
Yeah.
you open it up and you have your guest over before and after.
Yeah,
Talk to
yeah.
you later. Bye.
But I'm wondering if this couldn't be used to fund a working charity that is in these countries, maybe trying to undo some of the damage, like Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without
That's one
Borders.
group. Unfortunately, much of the damage in these countries, especially Iraq,
Yeah.
is impossible to undo, like the depleted uranium weapons.
Oh, man.
And they're
Yeah.
having a huge problem with really severe birth abnormalities as a result of the radiation. It's even hit our own veterans who
Yeah.
served over there.
And their
And
kids.
they get exposed, and they come
Yeah.
back, they start a family, and all of a sudden their children are born with serious birth defects. And to our leaders, well, it's just, you know, bad things happen in war. It's the cost of doing business. And that's a horrible thing, because these children, whether American or Iraqi, they are innocents.
Yes.
They're absolute innocents, and they're born into the world with all of these horrible problems
Mhm.
through no fault of their own. And it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be allowed to happen.
And there have been many occasions now in Yemen where those people have been exposed to DU, and consequently, their children are experiencing the same terrible deformities and abnormalities.
Everywhere the U.S. has been using depleted uranium weapons, the same result follows.
Yeah.
In a way, it's a form of chemical warfare,
yeah.
a weapon of mass destruction, because when the weapon is used, it vaporizes and oxidizes, and it mixes in with the soil, and when the wind blows, everything downwind is contaminated. And that can cover miles and miles of area, and that fits the definition of a weapon of mass destruction. Anything else, Scott? I guess we lost him.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, we're coming up on our last commercial break of the program. And when we come on back, Claire has got a few more things to share with you. And then we'll be signing off for the weekend. So we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And Claire, what's next on your list?
I was thinking of all the situations the UN is supposed to fix. Guess what it just did?
Please enlighten me.
It scolded countries for cannabis legalization. And the United Nations International Narcotics Control Board, INCB for short, recently issued its 2017 annual report and expressed a deep concern about the spread of adult use legalization. Really? When medical marijuana use has been shown time after time to relieve pain and combat PTSD. Oh.
Also glaucoma.
Yeah.
And some of the nasty side effects of chemotherapy.
Oh, I forgot. The big pharmaceutical companies haven't been able to patent it. There are patents which have been applied for on kratom by big pharma like GlaxoSmithKline, but because marijuana use has been outside big pharma's control, they don't want people to have it.
Well, kratom, like marijuana, is a natural occurring plant.
Yeah.
And we went down this road several years back where Monsanto was trying to patent naturally occurring plants and vegetables.
Right.
And the courts struck them down on that, saying, no, you can't do that. But the greed knows no boundary out there. And again, it just proves what one of our callers said today. The United Nations is itself hopelessly corrupt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's all about protecting the tobacco industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the liquor industry.
Yeah.
It's all about money.
Yeah. And not about what can really help the patient.
No, if they make you sicker, they get more money.
Yeah.
That's the feedback loop in the medical industrial complex. We can make you sick, get you hooked on prescription drugs, we make more money from you.
I went through that problem myself, as you will remember.
I remember.
And I was starting to have massive pain in my joints, my hands and feet, limping on both feet. And the doctors at the HMO that I went to never gave me the one test that could have liberated me from all that pain.
They prescribed a Neurontin, which is not even supposed to be a pain medication. It was very expensive, and it was very hard for her to get off. And in the end, we discovered the problem was the presence of certain chemicals in products, primarily formaldehyde precursors.
Yep.
And once we got those out of our house, problem went away.
Yeah, I was fine. But the other problem, and something you need to ask your healthcare professional when they prescribe something that is relatively new, look them in the eye, smile, and say, are you being compensated by the drug company making this drug to prescribe it to your patients? Because that's a big deal as well.
Yeah, that's out of control here. There are now websites popping up that basically list the names of doctors and what they're getting from pharmaceutical companies. And I was rather shocked to find out the doctor who treated me for my illness some years ago was getting all kinds of big bucks from these companies to push certain drugs and certain services and certain treatments.
Yeah. So I think that as an informed consumer, and you can do it nicely, you don't have to be belligerent, But I think that the money can sometimes color a doctor's judgment about what they're going to give you or what they're not going to give you.
Okay, well, we're out of time here, so please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure that he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learned here at RBN and whatreallyhappened.com with everybody. We have to keep getting the word out. The corporate media is trying to shut the independent media out, but they can't control word of mouth, phone calls, email, fax machines. Fax machines brought down the USSR, and that's all it takes is people willing to go for the truth. So aloha, and we'll see you on Monday.